If I asked you to think about a game that has brought you more joy playing it with friends than any other game, what game would that be? For me, there's only one answer, and it's Warcraft 3, and it's specifically TDs. If you want to, leave your answer in the comments below. And now, let me tell you a story about how my partner and I started making a game that, without us realizing it, turned into a completely new take on a TD. To make a long story short, after years of working with different projects, we looked at each other and said,
well, fuck that.
We were gonna take the leap and go after our childhood dream of making games. We started just playing around in Unity and finding different tutorials on YouTube. But after a while, it was clear that if we were seriously going to pursue this, we had to actually take some real courses and spend some real time studying game development.
Well, fuck that.
We started with the free courses that Unity has, and then we found gamedev.tv, who makes just great courses. I can't recommend them enough if you're interested and you're starting out. We have taken several of their courses in Unity development. Besides that, I've taken a practical course in AI programming in Unity, which I can also really recommend. Links to all of the courses are in the description. After completing all of these courses, we felt it was time to try and actually develop a real prototype of a game. We didn't yet dare to try to make something commercial, but we wanted to try and make something that felt complete, even if it was just a level or 15 minutes of gameplay. To use everything we had learned, we decided to make a simple arena game. You would play as a gladiator, and the idea was to make a simple wave-based arena game where you defeat waves of enemies, gain experience to level up and get new abilities, and also collect new weapons. Yeah, I know, real original. We wanted the combat and controls to be kind of like Hades, where you control the player with a mouse and keyboard, you can dash and hit in all directions, and it feels fast-paced and fluent. I actually think we did a decent job of copying the controls of Hades for our first game ever. It's difficult to see, but controlling the character actually felt quite fluent. I swear guys, it's true. We had a basic wave system running that will spawn more and more enemies as you progressed. There was a weapon system built with scriptable objects so that we could easily make as many weapons as we wanted, and we had this little demo pickup so you could pick up a sword and do some more damage. Where we ran into problems was with the animations and 3D models. We want to make everything ourselves as much as possible, but for two newbies, creating humanoid models and animations, and especially for melee combat, was just too much of a challenge. We could never really get it to look as good as we wanted to. So during the course of a weekend, my partner responsible for the 3D models and animations sat down and made a 3D model of a tank in Blender. The next Monday, he presented me with this amazing, insanely awesome, monster cool tank he had made. We had a serious discussion about changing the game to align it with our current skill level. The goal was to still make a complete prototype, but in a way where we could also use it as a learning experience and make everything ourselves. Code-wise, it didn't really make that much of a difference if it was humans or tanks competing in the arena, or at least we didn't think so at the time, and so we decided to change the game from a gladiator arena to a tank arena. Contrary to what we thought though, it turned out to be quite different coding wise to control tanks rather than humans. First of all, rotating a turret on a tank is a lot different than rotating a human character, and making it feel right took way longer than expected. There's a lot of vector math involved in that, and none of us are really good at math.
You've got a fine brain, Jack.
Something as simple as rotating a turret proved to be one of the most difficult things we have had to do so far. Welcome to game development. Then came the steering itself, and controlling a tank that has to feel heavy and motorized with friction and suspension and physics. This is Also very different from controlling a humanoid character, and it was the first time I was introduced to physics-based steering and something like wheel colliders. We went from flying tanks to drifting tanks to jumping tanks. Don't even get me started on the floating freaking walls.
You think that's air you're breathing now?
It took some time to get the hang of it, but after a week or so of tinkering, I finally got the steering down. Then came the AI, and that was pretty easy. Just kidding! At this point we had a controllable tank, a working enemy AI, and now it was time to get serious about the environment. We went through so many different iterations of this, from hyper-realistic to Borderlands cartoony, and from concrete military complex to futuristic Command and Conquer style base. And after some time we found that we really liked the style of Command and Conquer generals. Yes, we're that old. It's a nice blend of realistic and cartoony. This is our main inspiration when it comes to the environment and visual style. As we worked on this arena model, we started talking more and more about how to make it fun. What was going to be the fun part of the game? First we agreed that it would just be the different ways that you would kill enemies, and as you leveled up you would gain new ways to kill the enemies.
You don't say!
At some point, once we got the new environment set up and looked at the base and the enemies coming in each wave, we noticed that it looked a lot more like a game where you could build some defenses as well as use your tank to kill enemies. We had a lot of back and forth about adding building because it's a whole new layer of complexity and maybe it would be too much. Eventually we decided that there was no reason not to try it and see how it felt. After all, we both loved the idea about a TD where you can build defenses against oncoming waves of enemies, but at the same time get the action of participating in the battle yourself. If we could get it to work, we both agreed it would be an awesome game. I mean, how hard can it be to add an entire game on top of the game that you're already developing, right? So now the elevator pitch of the game looks like this. It's a TD/ real-time action game where you continually defeat more difficult waves of enemies and gain new turrets and abilities for your tank, as well as unlock new towers and upgrades for your towers. Occasionally there will be boss fights. Oh, and I nearly forgot. Everything is destructible and everything is going to be physics based. We're both huge fans of the randomness and chaos that come along with physics and destruction. I mean, at this point, how hard can it really be to make this game? At this point we felt pretty confident that we had a basic structure of the game down, and so while continuing development we started talking about the story. The story is about this boy who falls in love with his dog and has to flee into the desert where they protect themselves against opponents of their forbidden love. No, we're pretty much screwed on the story. We got absolutely nothing. So if you have ideas, please give them to us so we don't have to work on it ourselves. You're more than welcome to join our Discord or comment on video. We take everything into consideration. It's actually been difficult for us to find sources of inspiration for this game, at least for the mix of building and real-time action that we want. We found this developer in Poland who made 2 games built on kind of a similar idea. The first is called X-Morph Defense and the second is the Rift Breaker. Both worth a try if you like sci-fi and tower defense. Very decent games indeed. X-Morph Defense is a more classic TD where the enemies come at you in a line. You can kind of block their path to make them go a longer route, and you can place towers along the route to attack them. Besides that, you control the spaceship that has different attacks. Some attacks work better for some types of enemies, and that becomes a strategic element in the game as you progress. The game has some pretty cool destructible environments that you can also use. For example, you can knock down huge buildings to block the way for enemies for a little while. This also comes into play in the boss fights, which are actually damn awesome in my opinion. The other game, the Rift Breaker, is more focused on survival and resource management. Here you control this giant mech and have to survive on a foreign planet by building a base, harvesting resources and researching new technologies. You're continually attacked by waves of enemies that you have to defend against with towers that you build in your base, as well as weapons that you craft for your mech. They use the same mix of real-time action and building that X-Morph uses and that we really want to implement as well. Although there are some clear differences between these 2 games and what we want to build, These are the closest that we have come to the same control scheme and mix of genres that we want. Where the Riftbreaker goes heavy into resource management, we want to keep it very simple. In the Riftbreaker, you have many different kinds of energy like wind energy, solar energy, gas energy, and so on and so forth. You also have to harvest a lot of different resources and refine them in lots of different ways to get new materials that you can use to build new buildings. Pretty interesting buildings. There are loads of upgrades and research that you can buy and loads of different buildings needed to keep your base running. This is a complex survival builder. In our game, you earn money by completing waves, and you can spend that money buying buildings and upgrades, and that's it. Our take is that the fun part is not managing resources or building complex infrastructure. The fun part is killing the enemies, hordes of enemies, in creative, strategic, and comically brutal ways. That's why we want to implement a combo and streak system so that you can maximize your gains in a wave by finding creative ways to kill as many enemies as possible, as fast as possible. And make no mistake, this is not going to be a realistic game. We want you to have Tesla coils and napalm throwers and all kinds of crazy ass weapons to kill the enemies with. But we start out with the boring stuff. Today we have this simple gameplay. Enemies spawn in waves, you can stay inside of your base and let the towers take out the enemies, or you can go out yourself and kill them with your tank. The tank currently has two different turrets, an M16 machine gun and a Gatling gun. As you've seen in the footage, we have had a more traditional tank cannon, and that is coming back, but we changed up the model recently and we have to fit that turret to a new model before that can return. When you go inside the base, your ammo will replenish, and so you can go there between waves to restock. We're not sure right now how that's going to work in the end. Whether the enemies should drop ammo or you should buy it as an airdrop between waves, we haven't really decided yet. Right now we're just in the beginning of working on the building system for the game. We've just implemented the ability to switch to a classic RTS camera and implemented mouse controls so you can select buildings. Also implemented this test feature where you can repair the tank. It costs $1,500 and just fully restores the health and the armor. This was just to get the ball rolling on this whole economy system where you can buy stuff by clicking on some UI. In later videos I might go into exactly how that is structured if anyone is interested. So next steps are to implement a simple building system where you can place buildings, they can be built, removed again, and so on. We need some UI for the building system, and then we need some more buildings to put into the building system, and that's all coming within the next month. So stay tuned. If you want to follow along on our journey, you can of course subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. In the description, you will also find a link to our Discord. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, video games melt your brain.